My name is Christine Lindstrom, and I work for the Student Public Interest Research Groups, and I'm the director of the Higher Education Project. Student Debt Alert is an educational campaign that the Student PIRGs started with a couple of coalition partners, state student associations, which are lobby organizations that work on behalf of college access and affordability issues at a statewide level. We launched the project with the Arizona Student Association and the Minnesota State College Student Association in the fall of 2005. The reason that we did that is because, unfortunately, students were becoming more and more reliant on loans to pay for their college degree. Over the past decade, state budgets have been cut for public colleges, and therefore students and their families have been picking up more of the tab of paying for college. And at the same time, grant aid at the federal level had been stagnant, hadn't increased. So what we saw is college students moving more and more to pay for their college degree with loans. In the early 90s, less than a third of graduates from four-year public schools had loan debt. Now, in 2004, almost 70% of four-year public college grads have loan debt. And that for us was an enormous concern, because what it meant was that young people, once they were graduating from college, weren't able to go and solve problems and, for example, take a public interest career that had a lower starting salary, because their loan repayment would kick in 6 months to a year after they graduated, and that figured prominently in their budgeting. And a lot of the starting salaries, for example, to become a teacher, ultimately they just couldn't manage paying for all their other cost of living expenses and repaying their loan on those low salaries. And we thought that that was running counter to what a college degree was supposed to be about, which is enabling people to go out into society and make an impact and help strengthen our communities. So we mobilize students across the country through a series of public hearings and public meetings, from Indianapolis to Berkeley to Orlando to Boston to San Diego to Chicago. We basically worked with students to show up at these places and testify in front of the Department of Education regarding their loan debt, and also the lack of grant aid and how that was also kind of forcing them to take on more loans. Students gathered thousands of comments to the Department of Education on this topic. We also created something called an online student debt yearbook, which was a very effective way for us to enable students to tell their personal stories of the amount of debt that they were incurring to pay for school, and how that was hindering their ability to move forward. And those yearbooks were incredibly successful. We could create state yearbooks and campus yearbooks and give decision makers the personal stories of thousands and thousands of students and the problems that they were encountering. We had 2 large inflatable balls and chains that are 10 feet tall, and we took them around from campus to campus to talk about the changes that we needed to make in loan policy. Against that backdrop, Congress had actually cut $12 billion out of the student loan programs to go and pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. Separate from the Student Debt Alert campaign, we, through the Student PIRGs, had been running a campaign called Stop the Raid on Student Aid, which was directly asking Congress to not implement that cut, and they did.
The National Department of Education and Congress ignored the 2005 Student Debt Alert and Stop the Raid on Student Aid mobilization in allegiance to the most privileged Americans. The dual campaign did, however, garner another outcome.
Got the attention of Democratic leaders who wanted to win the election in November of 2006. And so what they did was decide that they were going to incorporate in their platform for running for office an interest rate cut on student loans, and cutting the interest rate from 6.8% to 3.4%. And the Democrats actually won the majority in the House that November, which was very exciting. So as a result, we all of a sudden had a very receptive audience in Congress for the first time in about a decade.
Right.
And so I do think that the efforts paid off and captured the attention of the right decision makers.
The efforts paid off, even though that tax cut still went through. In fall of 2007, the College Cost Reduction Act was passed. But who will it actually assist? And will its provisions be enough to impact those who need the relief most? And how do we gauge the answers to questions like these? I'm on the line with Anya Kamenetz. She's a journalist and author of the book Generation Debt. She's also a regular writer for the Village Voice. She has a regular blog where she writes about debt, student debt, and she's also, I understand, you have a column with Yahoo Finance, correct?
That's right, and I'm also a staff writer for Fast Company magazine.
Oh, fantastic. So let me just start by asking you a bit about Generation Debt. I believe it's coming out on paperback, is that correct?
Generation Debt came out in paperback actually in 2007. In January '07, and it was a book that I started working on when I was a writer for the Village Voice, and we started doing a feature series on what we called the new economics of being young, and that grew pretty quickly into this idea for a book about just the whole range of economic issues that young people, under 35 or so, are facing in the changing economy. So, the rising cost of higher education, the immense growth in consumer debt, the changes in the job market that just introduce a lot more uncertainty to people in their early years.
How have things shifted since that book came out in 2005?
Well, it's interesting. I think when I first started looking into this, student loan debt was really kind of dismissed in the public perception. It wasn't seen as being that big of a deal. People just looked at the fact that, okay, you can, it's still a good investment to go to college on average, and you can pay the debt off. And as the book started to get published, and a number of other books around the same time, and other public discussions of it, you just started to see a lot more people talking about, well, actually, this debt can really affect people's lives. It's changing the course of people's careers. It's hurting young doctors and young lawyers and people who are trying to get a PhD, and really looking all across the board at this as being a serious problem.
Mm-hmm. And is that what helped manifest the College Cost Reduction Act?
Well, I think that, the political climate of this has shifted a lot, obviously, with the election of Democratic Congress in 2006, that, they made reducing the cost of college a major cornerstone of their campaign, and one of the first 100 and so. And the other thing about it, too, is that we've gone pretty far, pretty fast in terms of growing this debt problem, but at the same time, the solutions are not that far out of reach. So it's possible to make some modifications, particularly to the subsidies that are going to the private industry, the private student lenders, and for relatively cheap. In fact, not spending any more money at all, but really improving the picture for students a great deal. So it's sort of an easy fix. It's something that has a real broad appeal.
Mm-hmm. So what does the College Cost Reduction Act actually do, and who does it affect?
So the College Cost Reduction Act, it's the foremost thing that it does is it cuts interest rates in student loans in half, and that's something that interest rates have gone up and down quite a bit over the last decade or so, and they landed at this 6.8% figure after being very, very low just a few years before. And so they're cutting that to 3.4%. They're increasing the loan limits, and that's sort of something that's counterintuitive. But the way that helps students is that students are increasingly shifting to the private student loans, which are much more expensive. And so by increasing the eligibility for lower-cost federal student loans, that helps pay for college as well. They're increasing the maximum Pell Grant up to about $5,200 from its current position of about half of that. And they are introducing a lot more of these loan repayment programs for anyone who could be considered a public servant. So loan forgiveness for, if you're an EMT, if you're a police person, a firefighter, a nurse, a public defender, as well as teachers and other people who are doing public service.
Now, does that include folks that have outstanding loans? Say I've been paying my loan for 4 years and I'm a public school teacher. Am I still eligible for that kind of forgiveness plan after, I think it's 120 payments?
As far as I know, I'm not sure that that program is going to grandfather in the people that have outstanding loans. I'm not really sure if that detail's been worked out yet.
As long as this detail is not worked out, social workers like Karen or teachers like Stacy will not be eligible for the ceiling of 120 payments in exchange for a public servant career commitment. With its interest rate cut, the Act will somewhat soften the blow of college loan debt for incoming and current borrowers. The welcome increase of the Pell Grant will be funded by monies that the government used formally to subsidize lending agents, ensuring their profit margin. Sallie Mae has not taken well to this modest shift. In January of this year, the corporation filed a Section F8 form stating, "We expect companies to exit this industry because of this act." Furthermore, the corporate giant warned in vague specificity that the act has now forced the company to become more scrupulous in who it will provide student loans to.